I am Yair, Klyman, and welcome to the Resilient Riches Podcast. We're at the bottom and nearly bankrupt as a family. It was my defining moment. I didn't want to live like this and knew it was time to change. The only thing I had left was my will and resilience to not quit. 10 years and millions of dollars later, I have a high-performing financial advisory business that I later brought my dad into. I love working with and helping people who have stories like me create financial freedom and impact on the things that matter most to them. My show will not only have great interviews and stories, but I will provide best-of-class tips and advice on how to build your financial foundation, as well as banter and argue with my dad, another one of my favorite pastimes. The episode today is actually a little bit different than our traditional programming. It's a special episode talking about the Middle East story, but it's talking about it from an Arab perspective. Dalia Ziadia is rated one of the top female bloggers in the entire world, and she was a big part of the overthrowing of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. She has risked her life and has literally been taken out of Egypt because she thought that she was going to get killed. She's now exiled. She can't come back anymore. But this episode is one that I promise you, you will never want to miss. The amount of information you're going to learn from this is going to be unbelievable. We're going to go into Qatar. We're going to go into what is an Islamist, what are all these buzzwords that we hear all the time, and why is this war so actually important for Israel to continue fighting and to continue to win. Welcome to the episode. We're excited to have you. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we really appreciate it. Now, I just want to send a special thank you to Ben Altman for everything that he's doing and just driving this through. It is not easy to get a lot of entrepreneurs into a room of this caliber specifically, and Ben is the perfect person who's able to do that. So, Ben, thank you so much, and I love what you're doing right now, using your platform and helping also Israeli business owners also invest their money, manage their money, and really just help people get to the next level. And it's amazing what you've done with your own platform. So we really applaud you and we really commend you for everything you do. Carmen, thanks so much for also being part of this and the YPO group. But we're going to talk about Dalia in a second, but I just want a couple things I wanted to tell everybody about Dalia. Obviously, if you've seen any media, you're going to see Dalia there talking about this. She's not on Piers Morgan because she actually knows what she's talking about, so it'd be very hard to actually have some people who know what they're talking about. But Dalia is recognized as one of the 17 bravest bloggers in the world. She's one of the 8 Arab women, the world's 8 agents of change, and one of the top 10 most powerful bloggers in the world, and is a big part of the overthrow of the Muslim Brotherhood. Dalia had an amazing story, which she'll probably go into today. The Muslim Brotherhood put a hit on her life, and Egypt put a hit on her life, and she called a Jewish friend, and within a few hours chartered a plane and got her out of Egypt and into the U.S. And we're so excited for you that Dalia was granted asylum as of last week, which was why we pushed our meeting off a week. So congratulations to Dalia. Welcome to the U.S. And as I said before, Jaliyatuna al-Yahudiya Tarhib Bikum. So welcome to the Jewish community. We're really excited to have you. So Dalia, I'm going to ask you some tough questions, and I'm pretty sure you can handle them. Are you a radical Islamist? Are you an Islamophobe?
Oh, wow. It's either or, either a radical Islamist or an Islamophobe. Oh my God. So first I want to thank you so much, Yair, for the opportunity. Thank you, Ben, for the organization and everyone involved here, also all the people who came, and thank you for your flexibility. Last week, I got this phone call from the USCIS, like, oh, we want you right here, right now. Like, I couldn't just postpone it. So thank you so much for understanding this. And thank God it turned out well. I got my asylum, which is great.
Wow.
Finally, I can breathe, So it's great, especially that unfortunately I'm still a target of the Egyptian government until now. They're still pressuring me, the Egyptian people, the Egyptian government. And recently you saw one of the Egyptians, just to give you an example of the type of the people whom I'm dealing with. You saw just one of them in Colorado 2 weeks ago burning people alive with his Molotovs, just for nothing, for anything other than being Jewish or a Zionist or so. So this is unfortunately the type of the people we're dealing with today. And back to your question, Yair, no, it's not either or. It's not either a radical Islamist or an Islamophobe. Thank God I'm neither. I am just a regular Muslim person. I am a Sufi. If you know Islam, Sufism is more on the left. It's more liberal than mainstream Islam. But the majority of Muslims in the world, I believe they are just individual people making individual practices. However, unfortunately, the organized groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and the jihadist groups like the terrorists, who they try to give the impression that actually they are the owners of Islam. They own Islam in order to promote their radical version of Islam. And this somehow created a reaction, because every action must have a reaction. And the reaction was the appearance of Islamophobia. Of course, it exists, but I think it does not exist in the way these radical Islamist groups are trying to portray. Anyone who tries to confront or refute or reject what they are saying, the extremist version they are trying to promote as the mainstream Islam, everyone who's trying to push against that, they always label this person as Islamophobe. Of course, it's easier for them to play this game with people who are not Muslims. But when people like myself come out and speak against them, they can do this with me. They tried, of course, but it didn't work. So thank God I'm neither. I'm just a liberal Muslim who wants the world to be a better place.
So what is the difference between an Islamist and a traditional Muslim? Can you break down the difference?
Oh yeah, let's imagine there is a spectrum kind of. This spectrum is I call it the spectrum of Islam. Not all Muslims are the same, by the way. Even in Arab Muslim majority countries, you will find that the practice of Islam in each country is very different. In Egypt, for example, we call it an Egyptian Islam. Literally, they use this term, the Egyptian Islam. In Turkey, they call it the Turkish Islam. It's not an exaggeration, they really use it. And so on. So in every Muslim country or Muslim majority country, the practice of Islam is very much dependent on the culture of this country. So in North Africa, for example, the version of Islam like in Morocco and so is very different from the version of Islam practiced in Saudi Arabia or in Gulf countries and so on. Even among Gulf countries today, the version of Islam practiced in the United Arab Emirates is very different from the version of Islam practiced in Kuwait or Qatar, for example, and so on. To understand this very easily, there is a spectrum of Muslims or Islam, let's say, or spectrum of Muslims to be more accurate. So on the very far right of the spectrum, we have the jihadists, the terrorists, all the terrorist groups we know today fall in this category. They believe that violence is the way, and they see the world divided into two groups, Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, which means the house of Islam and the house of war, which means anyone outside this house of Islam or Islamic Ummah is eligible for fighting against or killing, or he belongs to the house of war. Any person who belongs to the house of war should be fought against or killed or so. This is how they think. This is how, this is a very simplification of the concept of jihad, or jihadism. So they are on the very far right. Just slightly after them, there is the political Islamism. And political Islamist groups are groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, for example. This is the most prominent one, the most one that's known globally. And their dream, they don't always adopt violence as the way. Of course, they believe in jihad 100%. They are kind of the basis of the Sharia or the law upon which the jihadist organizations operate. However, they themselves don't practice jihad directly. They don't practice violence directly. They practice another form of violence, which is political violence. We can call it like playing politics. They operate within the nation system, the state. They operate within the system of nation states. They don't go against it or outside of it like the jihadists do. No, for example, they can come to they already are in the US here and Canada and other Western countries. In these Western countries, for example, they value women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and so They will not, although it's against their ideology, they will not go against these groups. On the contrary, they will try to converge with these groups and ally with them in order to create a greater power. And this is what we're seeing today in what we call the red-green alliance, or the sinful marriage between the radical left, the Marxists, and the radical right, the Islamists. And we're seeing it around us everywhere now, including the recent riots in Los Angeles, for example. So these are the political Islamists. What is their goal? What is their end goal? Is to establish an Islamic caliphate that encompasses the entire globe, not in a certain place on earth, that encompasses the entire globe, where Muslims will be ruling above everyone else using Sharia. And Sharia is an extremist version of the Islamic law that they believe in. So these are the political Islamists. If we move with the spectrum further, we will find in the middle the formal meaning official Islamists. These are the type of Islamists who work under states, especially in Arab countries and Muslim majority countries, like, for example, the Al-Azhar in Egypt. Al-Azhar is an official institution. It's working under the supervision of the state, and they are funded by the state and their goal is mainly to control the public and make them more obedient to the state, using religious rhetoric, using, the influence of the mosque, similar to the influence of the church in the medieval era. So this is the formal Islamists. They are more centered, they are more towards to the moderate Islam, although I don't like to use this word moderate because there is nothing like this, but it's, let's say, the average Muslims. They are much closer to the average Muslims. Then when we go to the left of the spectrum, things become more liberal, more open. It's mainly more in the younger people, not in the older generations. You will see that. You will see the Sufis and the liberal Islamists, and also secular Islamists, or secular Muslims. Some people call themselves that, although it may sound contradictory, like how come secular and Muslim at the same time? But they mean that they still can practice Islam individually as an individual religion, but at the same time adopt secular values. Liberal Muslims are a bit different. They are practicing Islam in public, like me, for example. I'm wearing hijab in public, but still I adopt liberal values, and liberal values are equally important for me as much as as my religion, my individual practice of religion. Sufis are different. I belong to the Sufis. It's mainly about spirituality. It's a spiritual version of Islam. Sufis is a very interesting sect in Islam. It's very, very ancient. It's all about, poetry, songs, love, relationship with God, how you can have this love with God. So it's a bit different. And unfortunately, some people on the right side of the spectrum of Islam, they consider us blasphemous, and they accuse us of being like not real Muslims or good Muslims. But here it is, Islam is very, very, very diverse within. However, the things that right now the mainstream Islam is kind of hijacked or occupied by political Islamists and jihadist rhetoric, including even the people who describe themselves as average Muslims. For example, if you go to Egypt or some Arab country and you speak to the general public, they will tell you, no, we are not a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Of course, we don't endorse the actions of the jihadists. But when you start to speak to them about certain things like Israel, like human rights, like women's rights, and so on, and the LGBT issues, for example, which is a big taboo, by the way, in the Middle East, in the Muslim communities in general, when you start to speak to them about these issues, they show you a face that's very, very similar to the face of the jihadists and political Islamists, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it's been hijacked, this entire community between, and I want to just make sure that there's a line here. There's the Islamist, and then there's the moderate Muslim community. You're obviously in the moderate community. The percentage of Islamists around the globe, it's 20% of the entire Muslim population?
Yeah, barely, yeah.
And
It's
so
not even more than that, yeah.
So, for example, Saudi Arabia, of all of Saudi Arabia, there's only about 20% of Saudi Arabia that is actually like Islamists. Qatar is the mother of the prime minister or prime minister of Qatar, or the king of Qatar was an Islamist. So there's different regions, and what we're going to do is we're going to break down what the regions actually do and what the difference between the Islamists and the moderate Muslim communities and what's actually changing. But let's go backwards in time, if that's okay. Can you describe what the historical shifts before the 1950s and post the 1950s? So what happened pre? And I know you have a amazing thought of how the world has changed so dramatically, and I really would love if you can bring that out to this amazing group. What happened pre 1950s and post 1950s, and then what happened in 1979?
Oh, yes, of course. Actually, let me share with you a presentation explaining that. And the reason why, like, the people need to understand this worldwide is because there is an impression that the Middle East has always been that radical, that hating or carrying this weight of hatred toward Israel or so, but actually this was not the case. The Jewish people used to live among with Muslims in the same communities, very happily without any problems for so long. So I'm not sure if you can see what I shared here.
If you just turn it into a slideshow, it'll make it much bigger.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so you can see now, this is what I call the three layers of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a theory that I created based on my studies and observation of the region, to trying to figure out what really happened, why the Jewish Muslim conflict we are living in today, why even we came to this point of having a Jewish Muslim conflict to start with. So I basically, the three layers are like this. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, like any other conflict in the world, started as a regional conflict, territorial conflict. It's something that it's two groups of people, the Jews and the Arabs. And by saying the Jews and the Arabs, I'm specifically speaking about the Jews and Arabs who lived in this region, in this particular region. That was called Palestine or Palestina under the British mandate. And they were fighting with each other, each of them claiming ownership of this territory, like many, many other examples worldwide. Perhaps the closest of them is in Cyprus, like the fight happening in Cyprus today, also between two groups of people over the island. And what happened is that this conflict reached a peak point in the 1920s up to the 40s during the time of anti-Semitism. And the Arabs in this region started to use anti-Semitic rhetoric exported from or imported from Europe to fight against these Jewish people. And we saw horrible incidents against the Jewish people at that time in this region, in this area, before it had other names. However, despite all the violence that was going there, it never affected the relationship between Jews and Arabs or Jews and Muslims in other Arab countries. Actually, if you see in here, this beautiful lady, Layla Murad, she is one of the Egyptian Jewish very famous singers and actresses. She's a movie star from this era. She's adored by Egyptians until today, except that the media lies and say that she converted from Judaism to Islam. So they can still show her songs and movies on TV, on national TV. But actually, she did not. Her whole family were in the film industry. They are very famous. They are very adored by the Egyptian people. And I think all over the region, by the way. So this is one example. At that time, at the time of the peak of the conflicts, there were over 100,000 Jewish people in Egypt. They were in movies, as I told you, in business, everywhere. After the rise of Pan-Arabism, as I will explain now, this number dropped dramatically to only 15,000. And today in Egypt, guess, like we are 100 million, over 100 million actually people in Egypt. How many of them are Jews? I mean, give a wild guess. Only 10 people. 10 people. 10, not 10,000, not 10,100, 10 people. So this shows you how things changed. But the question is how things changed, why it happened. What happened is that in the 1950s, Egypt for the first time is under the rule of an Egyptian leader. That was Gamal Abdel Nasser. Gamal Abdel Nasser was the first Egyptian ruler of Egypt. He came after a military revolution. It's a military coup, but they call it a military revolution, the Free Officers' Revolution against the Muhammad Ali dynasty, which was an extension of the Ottoman Empire. Before that, Egypt was only ruled by Ottomans, by Turks, by British, by French, people who are not Egyptian. So this somehow gave a boost to the ego of Gamal Abdel Nasser that, okay, now is the time not only to, especially that his revolution was also exported to other Arab countries, and they started also to have their own revolutions, like military revolutions against the Ottoman Empire. So he came to the idea that, okay, why don't I unify all the Arabs under my rule, and I become the king of the Arabs, kind of. And actually, to do that, it's like a mission impossible. Arabs are not the same. Like Muslims are not the same. Arabs also are not the same. I always like to make the joke that if you bring someone from Morocco to speak with another Arab from Kuwait, in very, very far in the Gulf region, they will not understand each other. And it really happened in front of my eyes in one of the lectures I was making at Al Akhawain University in Morocco. They did not understand each other at all. And this tells you that really not all Arabs are the same. Although they maybe speak the same standard language, but in their lives they are very different. And they're also political views, ambitions, and so. So to bring them together, it's impossible to bring them together on one common thing. You have to bring them together to fight on a threat, out of fear. And the easiest thing for Gamal Abdel Nasser at that time to play, or the easiest game to play, was to point at Israel, which was a newborn state at that time. We're speaking at early 1950s. Israel was just established. So a newborn state in the region, and they don't speak Arabic language, the majority of them. So why don't we just point at them and say, oh, they are the enemy, and we have to unify together as Arabs against that enemy. And this was the game that Gamal Abdel Nasser played. It was very interesting because he also gave it a tint that is more communist or Marxist tint because of his own background, of his own political background as a communist. And communism also was very popular at that time. So to justify why we as Arabs have to attack Israel or look at Israel as an enemy, he described Israel or labeled Israel, gave Israel a label that remains until today as an agent to Western imperialism. I'm sure you've heard this term a lot recently in all the protests that are happening in support of Gaza and so, and also on campuses. If some of you have students at campuses and so, they went back again to using this term, Western imperialism, and Israel is being an agent to Western imperialism in the region. It started from there. It started from Gamal Abdel Nasser. As soon as Nasser started to do that, actually the discrimination wasn't, or the fight was not only against Israel, but also against the Jewish people who lived in Arab countries. And in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, also North African countries and so, and they were all pushed out of these countries and discriminated against, and I'm sure the story many of you know very well. This remained the case until the 1967 war. When Arab countries, they thought like, oh, okay, this is a very tiny country called Israel. We will just go there and crash them in no time. And actually a Syrian commander at that time, he said, we will go and like just wipe Israel off the map in 6 hours. And what happened is that 6 days later, Israel defeated all of them, defeated all the six countries, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, that went to fight against, defeated all of them, and even took parts of their territories. And this comic here is very funny. It just portrays it. It just explains the story in a very, very good way. And then at that time, Arab countries realized that, okay, Israel is not going anywhere. We have to make peace with Israel. We have to find ways to fix the relationship with Israel. That's why in the 1970s, we started to see many initiatives to de-escalate with Israel, and then to have negotiations with Israel, and then eventually to have peace treaties with Israel, like the one signed between Egypt and Israel in 1979. However, actually, these peace treaties were not like warm peace, were not real peace treaties. They were just accepting the status quo, accepting the fact that Israel is remaining here and we have to deal with it. It's not coming out of really wanting to have good relationship with Israel and partner with Israel, like what we saw with the Abraham Accords recently, for example. So in the 1990s, in 1979 in particular, something very interesting happened in the region. Anyone maybe, think about it, but for the sake of time, I will tell you quickly. It is Iran. A huge political change happened in Iran. The Islamic Revolution succeeded in bringing down the Shah and taking over Iran. When this happened, this inspired radical Islamist groups and political Islamist groups all over the region who could not really act publicly under the communist rule of Abdel Nasser and Sadat and his follower Sadat. And so under the communist rule in the region in general, they couldn't act publicly. Now they have their opportunity to come out to the public, reintroduce themselves, and try to influence them. So what happened is that this inspired groups like the Muslim Brotherhood to take over. And of course, also they played on the same game of let's resist against Israel, to mobilize the general public. And how to resist against Israel? This time, they didn't say to liberate Palestine or take over this Palestinian territory for us, not for the Jews, but now they started to say it in a different way, giving it an Islamic tint by saying that we are here to, or we are mobilizing as Muslims to fight against the Jewish people, to liberate our Muslim holy sites from their hands, al-Muqaddasat al-Islamiyya. Also, I'm sure you've heard this word a lot. To liberate our Muslim holy sites from their hand. And thus, the conflict moved from being a territorial conflict into a regional conflict, Arab-Israeli conflict, into a global intifada, as we can see today, a global war between all Muslims and all Jews. So I hope this...
And it's, yeah, thank you, Dalia. Last time you didn't show this to the crowd, but I see that you used to be more timid about this point, but now you made some slides. So it's really amazing. And you can see that in Dalia's book. But the understanding of the difference between what happened pre-1979 and post-1979 is such a crucial piece. My family was actually, my great-grandfather's brother was the first person that was hanged in Iran, and that started the revolution. That was the Habib el-Ghanian. So we were very directly involved in it. But there's this weird concept that the U.S. has to be so involved and support Israel. And it drives, there's so much passion on like, okay, we have to support Israel. And then there's also so much passion about caring about the Palestinians when you don't have to, when there's extreme tragedy in Yemen and in Syria and all these other countries. So why is Israel so important to the U.S. and why is it so important to us, not just as Jews, but as the global U.S. world and the Western world? And then what is this Palestinian cause that they talk about?
Oh my God. Let me start by the last point, the Palestinian cause. Of course, this is one of the biggest deceptions of our history and of our time. People use the word Palestinian cause freely as if it is as if it is a noble thing, as if it is some good noble cause to maybe give power to the Palestinian people, give them a future, give them a life. And so But this is very, very far from the truth. If you go to the Palestinians themselves and you speak to them, you speak with them, and you ask them, what is the Palestinian cause? And the same thing applies to all other Arabs and Muslims who are advocating for the free Palestine today, by the way. If you speak to them, what do you mean by free Palestine, or what is the Palestinian cause exactly? They will not mention anything about building a Palestinian state or having a future for a political future for the Palestinian people. They will tell you the Palestinian cause is about annihilating Israel, is about destroying Israel, is about destroying the Israeli state. So the next time you hear this word, the Palestinian cause, remember that it is not about building a Palestinian state, it's about destroying the Israeli state. And we all have to understand that in order to be able to understand the message that Free Palestine groups are trying to give to us, and we're just ignoring, especially Western people here in the US. They are giving you clear messages about their objectives and their goals. They see Israel and America in one boat. And this takes me to the other point you mentioned here, like why Israel is important. I'll take you to how, for example, the Iranians look at Israel. The Iranian regime, not the Iranian people, of course, the Iranian people are amazing. I'm speaking about the regime. The Iranian regime, the Islamic regime in Iran, always refers to Israel and America as one thing. Israel and America as Israel is a small Saturn and America is a big Saturn. And our mission is to destroy the small Saturn. So as one step towards destroying the big Saturn. This is how the Islamic regime in Iran think. And unfortunately, this is how like the mainstream or the majority of the Free Palestine movement think. So when they attack Israel, in their mind, they are attacking the Western civilization. They are attacking the Western culture. Why Israel is so hated in the region to start with? Well, because it's a democratic country in a region that does not believe in democracy. It's a very successful country when it comes to business. They are, yes, it's small, tiny compared to the rest of the region, but they are very, very successful with technology, with business, with all of that. So somehow that's why the region envy it, because it's an example that yes, you still can live in the Middle East, you still can have, hummus and falafel and enjoy this stuff, and at the same time enjoy something very Western like democracy. There is no contradiction. This is what Israel represents, and this is what scares Arab regimes the most. And this is why they hate Israel so much. And this is how over time they have been brainwashing the people into believing that Israel is the enemy. Israel is in Egypt, for example, oh my God, I grew up listening this. Like Israel is our historical enemy. If our borders are opened at any minute, Israel will immediately get into Egypt and take over Sinai. But guess what? The Arab Spring happened in 2011 and I was part of it. And we brought down Mubarak dictatorship. This created a state of instability, of course, in the country. And we were expecting just Israel will do just that, it will take over Sinai. But guess what happened? Hamas infiltrated into Sinai. Hamas, the terrorist organization that was and is still praised in the Egyptian media as freedom champions, infiltrated into Sinai, killed our soldiers, killed our people, and tried to take over Sinai by terrorism. And who helped us get rid of Hamas? Israel. Israel helped Egypt. Like for the first time in 2015, the Israeli military and the Egyptian military were fighting shoulder to shoulder in Sinai against Hamas. So this is Israel, a real neighbor, a good neighbor, with whom which our economy and security is very interdependent with them. So this is the real Israel that was never represented to us. So today, this Free Palestine movement that's going on around the world today, it has also nothing to do with Palestine. Their goal, by the way, is not only to destroy Israel. Israel is just one step in the way. Their goal is to destroy you, the people listening to me now, to come and hurt you and destroy your civilization, destroy your world Why? Because they hate your civilization so much and they want to build their Islamic caliphate on the ruins of this civilization. And how to destroy it? By promoting things like the Free Palestine. Look today, the riot in Los Angeles. It appears like to be an effort made by the Latino people. Or it is like, this is the cover. But look, in every video where there is a violence practiced, there is a Palestinian flag. There is a Palestinian kufiya. There is someone chanting Free Palestine. In every video where there is violent, in every incident of violence captured on video, in these riots, there is a Palestinian flag and there is a Palestinian kufiya. We should not ignore that. They are there to destroy the West. And as I always like to say, anti-Israel is anti-Semitism, equals anti-Zionism, equals anti-Westernism, and equals anti-Americanism. And please remember this. These are not good people. They are really evil people.
Dalia, we have a few more questions, but we've gone back about 100 years in the last 20 minutes. So we appreciate you transporting us through time. You talk a lot about, and you write about in your book, about the next stages and current events. And you talk about and I see you on the media, what's currently happening and what's going on in the region. So recently, the White House did a trip to Qatar and they accepted a plane from the Qataris. And it looks like they're normalizing ties and normalizing trade. Was there a strategy by it? Was there duping by it? What is actually happening in current events?
You mean specifically about the relationship between Qatar and Israel, or Qatar and the US?
Qatar and the US.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This is a big deal, by the way, because Qatar is playing a very dangerous game. And it seems that...
And sorry, Dalia, before you do that, can you actually speak about how the Gulf states were founded and then where they are today?
Yeah.
So just go back.
Sorry,
to go back
point.
1 second.
Exactly. Thank you, Yair. Because yes, this will frame everything. Actually, if we want to understand how the Gulf countries are operating, we have to keep in mind, or to always remember this word, tribal competition. These are tribes. All the Gulf countries we see today, the 6 Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, their big sister, like their originator or their mother, we can say, was mainly a tribe. It started as a tribe. And then this tribe, multiplied into a number of other tribes, like, cousins, sons, and so, and each of them had their own tribe. And then they started to fight with each other, these tribes. They fought because of the scarcity of resources in this region. It's a vast desert. So they fought over water, over food, and they had to move as the fighting was happening, to move. And by the way, who was fighting with who? The same family, the same members of the family, the same cousins, the same brothers, and so, but they are fighting for their own families, for their own wife and children, and so, with their brother. So this culture of killing each other, even if this person is your brother, unfortunately is very acceptable until today in this region, in this Gulf region in particular. So then as part of the fighting and looking for resources, and so they kept moving over this vast desert, and each tribe settled somewhere away from the other tribes, also to avoid conflict with them, and so until they discovered oil and gas in also around 60s, 70s. But before that, they started under the influence of the British occupation, and so they started to organize themselves into states. And each tribe, we can easily say this without being exaggerating, that Gulf countries today are tribes turned into states. This does not mean anything bad about them, but this is just a way to understand where they are coming from. Tribes turned into states means that the leader of the state, the leader of the state is actually the head of the tribe. He's the father of the family. Like, for example, if you look at the United Arab Emirates today, they look at Zayed, Sheikh Zayed, the founder of the United Arab Emirates, as the greatest father. He has all the respect. He's the one who's dictating everything. His sons, Mohammed bin Zayed, and so are the ones who took over after him, and so on. So this is how they are structured. Unlike countries like Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and North African countries, they have a different political systems that are republican systems, very, very different from the monarchies. That's why during the Arab Spring, while there were movements by young people in Egypt and Tunisia and other countries against dictatorships in their republics, it did not affect the Gulf region. Why? Because their system of governance is completely different. It's a monarchy, it's a family. It's very hard for the younger people in this family to rebel against the older leaders who are looked at as father figures. So, and now, of course, they are also very wealthy, which kept them immune against any movements that are motivated by economic reasons, like economic crisis or lack of food or anything like that. So this is how the Gulf region works. Now, as part of this competition, each of these countries try to establish or to have its own source of power, its own cards to play with each other first, before to play with the world. So first, Saudi Arabia is the biggest in terms of size, biggest in terms of the tribal respect, because it's the founding tribes came from the land of Saudi Arabia. And it's also its main source of power in Saudi Arabia is that it is the holder of Islam. It is the land where Islam started. They are the owners of Islam. This is their power. So this is Saudi Arabia. Other Gulf countries like United Arab Emirates, for example, they were different emirates, and they came together, unified together under one state, and their power comes from their diversity as tribes and the fact that they still can work together, and they have resources. They have a lot of gas and oil, and so they have resources. And thus, they are building this was their main source of power. For a country like Qatar, Qatar was supposed to be one of the emirates that should join the United Arab Emirates, the other 6 emirates. They should have been 7 emirates, including Qatar. But Qatar, at that time, the tribe that formed Qatar, which is a tribe of bin Hamad al-Jassim, from which the Prince of Qatar came, they said, no, we want to be an independent country of our own. And they had the right to do so because actually they have huge resources in their small island. So why merge into another state and give power to another state if they are already very powered economically? They are very, very powerful economically. But over time, this both actually Kuwait and Qatar, they are very, very small islands. So they started to Kuwait is a semi-island, so they started to be harassed and intimidated by the other Arabs. In Kuwait, we remember very well the Iraq invasion of Kuwait in the late 1980s and early 90s. So this made Kuwait like, to seek some source of power. The same thing for Qatar. Qatar also were harassed and intimidated by their neighbors, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and even Oman, for example, Oman is very, very interesting, Sultanate Oman. It gets its power from alliance with Iran on the other side of the Gulf, on the other side of the Gulf Sea. They cooperate with Iran, and this is their source of power because otherwise they don't know how to protect themselves. Bahrain depend entirely on Saudi Arabia for protection and power and control. Bahrain is also very small. And Qatar did not have anyone to protect it and did not have anyone to support it against all this harassment and intimidation. And it also, out of tribal senses, it wants to feel strong. It wants to feel great like all the other countries. So how to win in this tribal competition? They looked for the unwanted people in the region and tried to ally them. And of course, like the main unwanted group in the region is the Muslim Brotherhood. So they opened their doors for them, especially when the new family, the current family, took power, which is the family of Prince Tamim and his mother and so. They opened their doors for all the unwanted people from the region, claiming that they are more open than the other Arab countries. So they took in the Muslim Brotherhood leaders, and they took in Hamas, they took in all the unwanted groups. And they gave them shelter, they gave them power, and thus these groups became their source of power. These groups became their main source of protection, actually. And this is how Qatar started to win over. And also to balance the great influence of the, Sunni Shia competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Qatar decided to look outside. So why just focus on being either allied with Iran or with Saudi Arabia? No, I will look outside and look who is the most powerful country in the world. That mainly, like in the region, in this Gulf region, the main ally was Britain, the UK. Historically, because of the occupation, and then the culture is very, very much influenced also by the British culture there. And most of the Gulf monarchies have houses in England today, by the way. And the wealthy people there have houses in England where they go in the summer. And so the influence is greater from England. But the Qatar decided to think outside of the box. So they reached out to the United States and they said, we are willing to host you. At a time, they reached out to the United States at a time when the United States wanted to have a strong military presence in the region to fight against Iraq first, Saddam Hussein, and after the invasion of Iraq and also to fight against Afghanistan and to fight, or the war in Afghanistan, I mean, so the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and also most importantly, its continued war with Iran. So Qatar went there and they said, we are offering you a piece of land on our island to build a military base, and you don't have to pay anything for this military base. It's for free. You just come, you bring your troops, and we will host you, we'll give you all you want. Who in the world could say no to this? No one. No one. So the US said, yes, okay, we will do that. And from there came the power of Qatar. From there came the importance of Qatar. Other than that, Qatar actually is very, very devious, very evil. They are doing all the wrong things to everybody, including to Arab countries, their Arab neighbors, their Arab brothers and sisters. And they are also manipulating Israel right now under the claim that they are mediating a ceasefire or providing humanitarian aid to Gazans, but all they are doing actually is just throwing one lifeline after the other to Hamas. And their mission there, their only mission there, is to rescue Hamas from the hands of Israel or from the hands of the US that are already crashing them right now. So this is Qatar. Qatar is a big story. Unfortunately, unlike the rest of the Arab Gulf countries, Qatar is very good with building strategies, long-term strategies, and following on them. They are very smart when it comes to this part. And I would say not them, but their backer, their main backer, Turkey, is very smart when it comes to this regard. So Qatar is playing a very dangerous game, and they will continue to play it. As I told you, they are very smart and very strategic. They have long-term goals, and they know how to get there.
Dalia, thank you so much for taking the time today, and thank you for sharing your insight, and really thank you for your courage. We have a lot of questions. Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you to bring in the questions, and we only have 8 minutes left, so we'll give each person a quick spotlight.
Right, and then I'll bring us to a conclusion. Why don't we start with Michael, my friend Michael Rochman. No Arab countries have a free press. The opportunity out of Gaza is done under the rule of Hamas, which does not allow criticism. Is there any significant Arab information source that actively, freely criticizes Arab leaders?
Oh no, unfortunately, you're very right, Michael. The problem is that in all Arab countries, the media is controlled by the state somehow, either supervised by the state, controlled by the state. And even the opposition voices are mainly controlled by Islamists. So you will not really find like a very good Arab resource. However, like one single Arab resource you can depend on. However, you can do as I do every morning. I open the websites, from one website from each news website from each Arab country that I know that it is already supervised by the government, but I read the version of the news they do, and then I read the other websites that belong to the Islamists and other news and compare. Until today, there is no one place where we can put all, like, can give you like a very neutral point of view on what's going on, unfortunately. Also, another good way to do this is Twitter feed on X, or Twitter, as I still like to call it. Is go to Twitter feed and read from certain people whom you trust. Like certain people whom you trust are only delivering accurate news from the region or from their countries, and also compare.
Great, thank you. We'll take another question here from Mark Isaacson. Thank you, Mark. How do we reconcile the immense destruction, loss of life, and suffering in Gaza with the atrocities committed on October 7th? Are there actions of the IDF morally justifiable in this context, or should alternative solutions be considered to address the conflict?
Look, actually, Mark, okay, it's a very difficult question, but I tell you something, war is ugly. And this is the case for war everywhere, either it is in Gaza or anywhere else. Right now, look at the wars that's happening in Sudan, for example, between the RSF and the official military or the state there. It's terrible and very scary, and nobody is paying even attention to it. It's very scary. If you see the numbers, millions of people displaced, millions of people are suffering famine, but no one is paying attention. I fear that there is a tendency to exaggerate the size of the war that's happening in Gaza. First of all the numbers we are receiving are coming from Hamas, and Hamas for me has no credibility at all. Hamas are the only one, even there are no foreign reporters there. Even all the media reports you're seeing are coming from journalists working inside Gaza who are either Palestinians or Arabs under the supervision of Hamas. So even the reporting from inside is not credible. So this is something to keep in mind. Second, what happened on October 7th is completely terrible. It's completely unjustified in any way. And if any country in the world really was exposed to this, it had to respond. It had to do something about it. If this huge percentage of your population has been kidnapped and killed in just one day, you have to act. You have to go and kill the people who killed them. You have to go after them. The thing is that when Israel went into Gaza to get Hamas, what Hamas did? They didn't fight as men. They hid under the tunnels. They hid in the tunnels like rats. Where? Under the houses, the hospitals, the schools of the Gaza civilians. They hid among the civilians and exposed them to this purposefully, exposed them to being killed purposefully. Why? In order to come back later and use their blood as a way of gaining legitimacy. And actually, this is not what I'm saying or claiming. You can go back to the statements of Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, when he clearly said, we want more and more bloodshed in Gaza because this blood is the fuel of our revolution. And by our, he means Hamas revolution. So it's all the mistake of Hamas. I mean, it's definitely the mistake of Hamas. Yes, Israel may look like what they are doing is very strong, it may seem too much because of the media coverage, but this is the case in any other war, by the way. This is what happens in any other war. People die in war, and that's why we are doing our best to avoid any war from happening to start with.
Thank you, Dalia. We've got one last question here from my friend Sash. Hey, Sash. Okay, actually there's two parts. Is it true that Hamas has been created by Qatar and they are behind the October 7th massacre? Does Qatar financial ability globally give them the edge diplomatically where many countries don't stand up for Israel? And then he also asked, how do we protect our Jewish communities?
Oh, wow, two strong questions. So the first one, is Hamas created by Qatar? No, it was created by the Muslim Brotherhood. There is a very interesting book by a guy called Tamimi. He details, he was there when Hamas was created. It was a conference in Jordan by the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood who had to flee their country, like the countries they were operating into other countries in the West. And they gathered in the 1982 in Jordan, 1983 in Jordan, and they drafted how Hamas should be created. They didn't call it Hamas at that time, but they said we need a movement that will do this and that and will be just called like an Islamic resistance movement, and it should be a jihadist movement and so. So it is the Muslim Brotherhood who established it. Then Israel tolerated it at one point because they wanted to weaken the influence of the Palestinian Authority. They wanted to control the what's happening inside Gaza, which the Palestinian Authority couldn't control. So Israel allowed them, unfortunately, gives them space and allowed them to operate for a while, thinking that they will not be a threat to Israel later on. Then Qatar, what happened before? Syria was the host of the Hamas leaders. And then at one point, I think in early 2000s, and so Qatar took the Hamas leaders there and then became the host of the Hamas leaders who are operating or living from outside Gaza. So this is how, but of course, when Qatar started to be the sponsor of Hamas or to take care of Hamas, the power of the group, it skyrocketed from being just a local group doing militia work, like, militia attacks from time to time, to now an actual governor of Gaza, a political group that has a militia affiliated to it, very powerful, as strong as a military. They have rockets, they have everything. So we can say Qatar boosted this group, but did not start it. Qatar is what created the Hamas as we know today, but not the Hamas that was created from the very beginning. The other question, how to protect our Jewish people communities, if there is any, how to protect our Jewish people and community, first of all, is to the battlefield is not only in our real world anymore. The battlefield, the actual battlefield, actually is now happening online. The younger people, my nephew, who's only 10 years old, is so much brainwashed with the rhetoric that's going on. And I was so surprised to know that. How come like a kid who's only 9 or 10 years old is so brainwashed? It's from TikTok. From TikTok. He learned about Israel. He cannot even point or locate Israel on the map. But he now is like joining the Free Palestine groups. How come? I don't know. It's so mind-blowing, So if you think about it, yes, the real battlefield is happening online. You all are entrepreneurs. You have to maybe make more and more initiatives of having more presence for the Jewish people and the version of the truth that you adopt to have more and more presence on social media in formats that appeals to these young generations, to make sure that your legacy will not be lost or hijacked or taken over by these extremists and terrorists who are actually using the Jewish people or the attack on the Jewish people as, or trying to legitimize it in a scene that's somehow bringing back to the mind, or bringing us back to the time of anti-Semitism in Europe, except that now it's happening in countries like the United States and Canada, which was supposed to be the places where the Jewish people ran to in order to avoid the anti-Semitism in Europe and the Middle East. So it's very scary. You have to do something about it as entrepreneurs. You have the power to support more and more initiatives of people who are giving your version of truth online.
Couldn't agree more. We have one more question. question I want to make an exception here to ask because I have a feeling you have a good answer for this. Where do you see hope for the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Oh, yes. Wow. The big question. Of course, it's not the two-state solution. I don't agree with that. I don't actually support it. But I think it's time now is ripe for finding the good people among the Palestinians. We saw recently some protests happening against Hamas, calling Hamas a terrorist organization. And the beautiful thing about these protests is that they are completely non-violent. They did not use violence, which busts the lie that Hamas has always been promoting, that violent resistance is the way. Now, for the first time, we are seeing Gazans and Palestinian people whose violent resistance is an essential part of their identity. They are putting violence aside and using non-violent resistance or non-violent movement to express themselves. So we have to spot these people, empower them, and find a way to bring them to the forefront to speak in the name of the Palestinian people. And I'm sure once we do that, we will find a way to reconcile or create some kind of system of governance where Israel will remain to have the dominant hand over this system of governance, but still it will be a system of governance that can really represent the real Palestinian people, not the type of people indoctrinated and full of hate people that Hamas has been training for years. So let's say it has to happen like a strategy of replacement. Find the good ones and see how we can replace the bad ones over time. So it's a challenge. It will take time. It cannot start now. We have to wait until this war ends and things become stable. But this could be like a long-term goal that we can think about from now.
Great. Again, I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Dalia, for your courage, your voice, and your powerful example. You truly are the future.
Thank you.
And thank you, Yair, for expertly guiding such an important conversation. Dalia, before we conclude, I'd like to ask you one last question.
Sure.
How can we best support you during this challenging time? You've done so much to support us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe start by following me on Twitter. It's exactly my full name, one word, Dalia Ziadia. And you will see good content there you will like, so
Awesome.
Start from there. And thank you so much just by bringing me here, Ben. You have already supported me and I really appreciate it. And I hope we will continue in contact with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Let's all take Dalia's message to heart and find her on Twitter. To all of you who joined us today, if you're inspired, share this conversation with others. If you'd like to get more involved in Tribe Voices or can introduce new guests, please reach out directly. And if you have a business and want to explore ways of using it to affect social change, direct message me. I put my contact details into the chat, the beginning of the chat.